Day 81. We're going to wrap up the book of Job with the title of perspective, the importance of it. And we can get so caught up in our own lives that we forget the bigger picture. Or even if we see the bigger picture, we can only see how it might affect us or our loved ones, our little world. And not that that's not important, but I think it's even more important to remember that there's a lot more at work here. Like, you need that, not just the 30,000 foot view, but you need the million-mile view or the infinite view. And remember that this world, as much as we know it, is infinite. Or at least we have a God or a creator, something that is not limited as we are by our five senses, our physical bodies, time and space, the dimensions that we are aware of. We get to the last few chapters and God himself comes in and gives Job the right perspective. He says, now listen here. And he doesn't do it by saying, blah, 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 blah. He does it in a really interesting way. He says, let me ask you a few questions here. And if you've got the answers, then maybe we can renegotiate this relationship and I'll listen to you and what you have to say. But first, let me ask you a few questions. And then he goes on to say, who hangs the sun in the sky? Who, creates the rain and the lightning and the oceans? Who gave the borders to the ocean? Who had the water spring up from the earth and yet was able to still control it and put a border around it and control it? He mentions great creatures, Behemoth and Leviathan. Like, he just goes through the whole list. Tell me, who is this? And of course, Job is like, oh yeah, I'm just a person who's caught up in his circumstances and is making the circumstances mean something about God. And it's easy to do. Like, our circumstances are powerful. We are persons. We take things personally. That is another thing that I thought about titling this today, was the acronym QTIP, quit taking it personally. A lot of us walk around, just taking everything personally, from the driver that cuts us off to the, maybe a grumpy person at the checkout. We take it all personally. And it's hard not to, because we're persons. And this is our experience and our perspective. But because we have these great, supercomputers in our brain, called brains, and not only that, we have this thing that we understand to be a soul. There's something more than just a computer. You're not a robot. You can actually take all of these things. Like, this is part of what it means to be a human, that's so unique and set apart from the other creatures. Having that proper perspective. So if you are feeling overwhelmed by life, the book of Job is actually a good one to read, especially the end, when we are brought back to a proper perspective. Maybe proper is not the right word, but accurate. That we get to remind ourselves who we really are in the grand scheme of things. this is what I tell my my children. This is one of my parenting techniques. I'm like, you're important to me, but you're not so important out in the world. Like, you need to remember your place. And I try to do that even with myself. Like, when I get too caught up in things, like if I fell off the face of the earth tomorrow or died of a heart attack, the world would keep spinning. It really would. Sometimes we get so full of ourselves and we think, oh, it's all on me, I gotta do this. And we just spin ourselves into like a state of just frenzy, and our nervous systems and get all out of whack, and our relationships can get out of whack, and our health, like everything, because we think it's all up to us and nobody can do what we can do. And that's true. It's not that that's not true, but the world spinning does not revolve on you. Life will go on. And when you can take a breath and realize that, and it makes me sad that there are so many people that get into such a dark place that they murder themselves, because they either can't take the pressure, or it just seems so overwhelming that there's no other way out, that things can never change. And I mean, we could see that Job could have easily gotten to that point, or he was at that point. And then God comes along and says, hey, let's chat here. Let's think about a few things. Let me ask you a few questions. And then Job is immediately like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I ever said those things. Like, please forgive me. Well, I don't even know what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking with the right perspective. I was only, thinking about my world and how things made sense in my brain, and, telling myself stories and letting my circumstances tell stories. And I love movies. Y'all have probably picked up on that. I love stories. I love books. And the movie that came to my mind this morning was, and it's also a book, is Dr. Seuss's Horton Hears a Who. Like, Horton is just out there doing life. Like, he doesn't know that there's a world beneath his feet that he could trample on, or that could be destroyed just by him being, who he is. And, so not only does he get a new perspective, but the Who's get a new perspective. They learned that there's even something bigger at play outside of their world. Somehow they had lived, in this field on this flower, pretty protected. And they didn't realize there was this larger danger and possibility out there. Now, I know this isn't really analogous to God, but it is a very real, story that maybe our brains can latch onto and understand the concept, and how we can easily get so caught up in our own world and the events, and it can just seem so overwhelming and maybe scary. Then you can ask yourself the same questions that God asked Job. And then you can go, I'm like, it could just take the relief off, and not to think that you're not important. I mean, you are important. That's actually the bigger, even perspective of all of this, is that God doesn't need us. In and of ourselves, we are fairly insignificant. We are. And yet we're not. But not because of us, but because of God. God thinks so much of us that even though he controls the wind and the rain and the stars and the sea monsters and, the principles even that guide our, experience of life, like gravity and all of that, he still thinks you are important. Me. Like, what? But not because we are important, but because he is. Like, we need to get it right. We need to get our perspective always looking up instead of around us, and making that dictate our thoughts and how we're perceiving everything and what our perspective means. We need to get our perspective this direction, so that then when we look out here, we don't get overwhelmed. And that doesn't mean that you're not sad, that you can't get angry, that you can't do something about it. That doesn't mean like, I think there are some Christians I hear out there, it's like, well, I'm just gonna, God will just take care of me. And maybe, but he also did give you a brain and tools. Sometimes he says, I'm telling you, like, don't go lay in the middle of the street. I'm not going to protect you from a car running over you. I gave you a brain. So some people, I think mistakenly, that don't really understand, use it as a free pass to just, like, their get out of jail free card, or use it all kinds of not good ways, or as an excuse to not fully show up and be responsible for your life. So you still have to be a good steward of your life, of your mind, of your relationships, of your assignment. Like, all of it's important. But don't make it so important that you forget who's really, like, in control, the bigger perspective. So it's important, but it's not supremely important. It's not more important, like, to keep things in their proper perspective, like, for real. And that, that takes time. It takes time to be still. Yesterday we talked about knowing versus understanding. One of my favorite passages in the Bible is, I believe it's in Psalms or Proverbs. Anyway, everybody knows it though. Be still and know. Be still and know. You can't, like, those two things are interrelated. Your perspective, in order to know and have the right perspective, you've got to get still. You've got to let God ask you a few questions. You've got to, and he gives us the right questions to answer. A lot of us walk around in life. I know I was one. I'm raising my hand here. I'm like, well, nobody gives you a manual on how to live life. And now I'm reading the Bible finally at nearly age 50. And I'm like, oh, well, it was right here all along. I just wasn't taking the time to get still. I was like, I'm too busy. I can't do it. I'll listen to, sermons or other people telling me. It's not the same. Or take a few minutes here and go trying to pray the right way. And there is no right way. Anybody that tells you a right way. Prayer time is prayer time. But the point is to really get still and spending enough time. And stillness, I'll add this before I go. Stillness doesn't have to look like sitting on the ground literally and be still. You can be still, and you've probably met a few of these people in your life, and you're like, how? You can be still in the midst of doing. Let that sit with you for a minute. It's not being caught up, it's not allowing your nervous system to get so fired up. It's that calm in the storm type of, staying connected. There's a thread. There's like a golden thread between, when you see those people, you can almost see that golden thread just connected from their brains. And they're like, they have been so connected to their higher source that they don't get caught up in the emergencies in the same way that other people do. They're the ones that are able to stay, kind of calm and be that voice of reason and strength and quietness. Those people. And I'm betting that those people, this is part of what they're doing, and how they got that way. They took the time, and they take the time on a regular basis to keep their perspectives in proper order. And they're not letting the circumstances and their own senses and their own, the default way of being human and the ego be in the driver's seat and cause the franticness. And I feel like I'm starting to get a little taste of that. Like, I used to walk around with my nervous system completely fired up all the time. And I didn't even know it because it was such a normal way of being for me. And it was starting to look like fibromyalgia, which is just a medical term for what I'm describing. Like, when there's no reason, it's your nervous system like on overdrive, and you've stored up and suppressed, and you're keeping things because I was caught up in the circumstances of life and people's moods and thinking I was responsible for all of the things, and it was all on my shoulders. I was my own God in my own little world. Even though I had also convinced myself that I'm the servant helping everyone, but it was all up to me as the helper. So when you're the helper type or the servant type, you cannot see the forest for the trees, that you are even being so egotistical. You're like, what do you mean? I'm doing everything for everybody else. That's not egotistical. Yeah, the truth hurts sometimes. Anyway, I have chit-chatted long enough. We're going to have storms here. I've heard a lot of people have had storms. It's March 22nd of 2022. The Ides of March maybe are coming. I think that's a day. I'm not using it in the right time frame right now. But I know storms have just hit west of us and south of us, and I think they're on their way to hit us today. So, and I'm going to keep myself in the proper perspective that this is just a day. That's the beautiful thing about doing this. One of the beautiful things about doing this sunrise habit, every day it's new. It changes. It's never static. And it reminds me to not get caught and stuck in the circumstances or let my emotions or my thoughts, to just stay calm. The storm will pass, not to be ruled by my emotions, and know that God is in control, having the right perspective, the bigger perspective. All right, I love you, my friends. Have a great Tuesday. Go rise and shine. I think my new slogan is, if you're gonna rise, you might as well shine. I found a coffee mug that said that. I'll have to show it to you. My new motto, if you're gonna rise, you might as well shine. All right, bye.